Denver Broncos offense has some glowing concerns as they progress through the regular season despite a Week 3 win. Where are some of the concerns? Should Broncos fans be concerned about the offensive line, right tackle? When might Billy Turner make his debut? And overall, what can the Broncos do to rectify some of the offensive struggles they've had early on the season? You get that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day. Free and available everywhere you get your podcast in audio format, or whether you watch us on YouTube. Do us a favor, go ahead, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. We celebrated Victory Monday for the Broncos as they progressed to 2-1 on the season, tied for first in the AFC West. The defense has been playing phenomenal, but the offense has some glaring concerns that need to be addressed, and they need to get over the hump quickly as the Broncos prepare for some tough opponents that are upcoming. Sayre, my friend, what's the issue with the Broncos offense?
Oh, man, Cody, I wish that we could pinpoint it to just one thing, right? But I will say, after week 1, remember, everybody's tweeting, if the Broncos play like this, they're going to go 0-4 or 0-5 to start the season. And, hey, they've been playing the same way for the better part of 3 weeks, right? Offensively, at least. And they've won 2 out of 3 games. So they're at least finding ways to win, which I think can really help boost the confidence of this offense. But to me, Cody, the issues with the offense are multifaceted. And I think we can look at a couple of different things against the San Francisco 49ers to really point as, hey, these are like, long-standing issues, if you can call them that, after 3 games. But just really getting into bad situations, right? Starting with that, getting into 2nd and long, 3rd and long, that really allowed the 49ers to kind of play to their strengths defensively, right? At least in this game. And going forward, as we're going to talk about, when you're playing against teams with great pass rushers, that is a big problem, because we saw Nick Bosa really wreck the right side of the Broncos offensive line against San Francisco. And the reason for that is you're not getting enough yardage on 1st down or 2nd down, and you're putting yourself in 2nd and 3rd and long situations.
Well, and one thing the 49ers did really well, especially with the safety, Tufanga, man, he is all over the place. But one thing that they did, they forced the Broncos to pass the football, because on 1st down, the Broncos would come out and they'd run the ball with Javonte. He'd get maybe 2 yards, 3 yards, because they would pinch the interior A gaps, and then they'd crash it down to the B, and they'd fill with a linebacker. I mean, there was really no room to kind of go through. And so kind of going to this point here, the Broncos against the 49ers, they averaged 3.7 yards per play on offense. I mean, Sayre, that is not good. That's not going to win you football games, and you can't always rely on that 4th quarter mile-high magic. It's not going to happen all the time, as much as I think it would be nice for Broncos country to have that. The offense simply has to play better, and I think a lot of it, I've seen people say, play calling is an issue. To be honest with you, Sayre, I don't have much of an issue with the Broncos' offensive play calling. I think that the designs, the schemes, I think they're pretty solid. I just think that the execution has to be much better, and we saw, you can make the argument maybe the 49ers. You can make the argument maybe about the LA Rams a little bit later on in the year. They probably have the toughest defense that Denver will have to play this season consistently. Guys that just constantly bring pressure and you have to account for. And I think that's a real big issue there. But also drops early on have been an issue for the Broncos. Now, Cortland had one drop, I felt like, when he was attacking upfield vertically and he went to settle. He turned around, the ball was right there. But, that's where you have to anticipate as a wide receiver. Like, hey, your quarterback's trying to deliver you the football. I think through the last couple of weeks, at least against the Texans and against the 49ers, the Broncos definitely struggled with a couple of drops in these last couple of games, which, is fixable. Are you concerned about that as you are about other things here?
I think I'm really concerned about the drops, honestly, Cody. It's getting to be a huge problem. And this goes back. It's not just a short-term issue. Like, I feel like the Broncos have kind of had issues with this for the last couple of years. where we were trying to figure out who's going to be the team's quarterback. On a lot of weeks, we're like, man, if the Broncos don't drop all these passes, maybe the quarterback looks a lot better. Now with Russell Wilson throwing the passes, it's almost like these guys haven't changed much in terms of dropping the ball. So it's really tough to see because it is going back all since game one, right? You've had issues with drop passes, and now having it come up in games like this. Just imagine if the Broncos had lost 11-10, that the conversation around these drop passes, like the one you mentioned to Cortland Sutton, it would be a much, much bigger deal. I think what we're talking about on Twitter and the narrative on Victory Monday. So certainly the drops are an issue for me. And I think just even ball security in general, but I think the biggest concern right now, Cody, is that the Broncos are getting in their own way with penalties. And we saw 25 through the first two games, 5 more against the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, you're going to have maybe at least a couple of penalties throughout the course of a game, but you really hate to see certain things happening with this offense, holding, bringing big plays back, different things like, any number of penalties. We've seen basically all of them at this point, haven't we? I mean, how many have we not seen?
We haven't seen roughing the passer again, if the Broncos, like Russell Wilson getting hit, we haven't seen a roughing the passer thing yet from them. So that would be,
well, maybe we should have seen that against the 49ers. I know he got decked in the head on one play, but there's definitely penalties with this offense, penalties and drop passes. And then it just seems that's what makes everything seem sloppy, right? That's what makes everything seem like, when people are saying, they're recognizing like the offense is not cohesive. The offense is just not in sync. Well, why are they not in sync? I think those are the top 2 reasons: drop passes and penalties. They're absolutely killing the Broncos right now. They're killing their momentum on any positive drives that they've been having.
And that's something that has to get fixed going forward, or else it's going to be a rough go for the Broncos offense. And look, probably not the ideal start that Russell Wilson or Nathaniel Hackett have wanted for their unit, but as we said, 3 weeks through the season, there's time to turn things around, but they're going to have to do it, and they're going to have to do it here quickly because some teams are picking up on some of the trends that are happening there, which leads us to our next point. How concerned should Broncos fans be right now about the offensive line, in particular on the right side? We dive into that coming up here in just a moment, but before we do that, let me tell you about PrizePicks. The sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos, and PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports done right, and with the PrizePicks app, you choose 2 to 5 players that you're focused on heading into the week. These players will have a projection that's set by PrizePicks, and you simply choose whether or not they will have more or less than their PrizePicks projection, which could allow you to win 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. So download the PrizePicks apps or go to PrizePicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's one word, Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. The Broncos offensive line had several areas of concern in Sunday's win against the San Francisco 49ers. And is it something other teams may pick up on? We dive into that coming up here in a moment. Just want to say thank you so much, everybody in Broncos country, for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite podcast and provider, or whether you watch us on YouTube. We appreciate you so much taking time out of your day to break things down, all things Broncos related here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. Sayre, my friend, let's talk about the Broncos offensive line. I think initially going through and watching the game live in the stadium, the thing that I noticed is just the constant pressure that the 49ers brought at the Broncos. And I think that was something that they had game planned for, because even against the Texans, like they tried to send some 4-man blitz, but there were times that the 49ers were sending 6, 7 after Russell Wilson. And then sometimes they were just sending 4, and they were getting home and they were flustering Russell Wilson in the pocket a little bit. And then we really saw him step up in the fourth quarter and avoid, as you mentioned in the post-game podcast, there was a time where Bosa had him around the ankle. He somehow puts his hand in the dirt, stays up and doesn't go down, and then extends the drive right there. That was a huge play. But outside of that, I would have to say that the offensive line play in terms of pass protection against some of the size and speed rushers that the 49ers had, there was definitely some realm from concern, I think, if you're a Broncos fan watching it, because guess what, Sayre? The Broncos in Week 4, they're going to play Max Crosby and Chandler Jones.
Oh, great. I mean, it's not good news. Let's just put it that way, okay? It's not getting any easier really with Nick Bosa leaving Denver, and now you got to go up against those guys. I mean, it's going to be tough. And like you mentioned, teams are going to start noticing these trends and tendencies on tape and say, hey, this is what the Broncos really struggle with as an offensive line. Let's just keep sending, like Ejiro Evero. If 4 don't get home, 5. If 5 don't get home, 6. And teams are going to keep doing that until the Broncos prove that they can stop it. And right now, Cody, I think the right side of the offensive line is a bit of a concern area, but also too, I think like with the whole issues of the play clock and things like that and trying to get the plays in quickly, like did the Broncos go into this game with fewer check calls or something at the line? I don't know. I don't know their game planning and things like that. So maybe there were situations and instances where they just didn't check out of plays, even with the 49ers giving them certain looks defensively. So I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think any theory is on the table at this point, but certainly just getting better at blocking the guy in front of you. The Broncos need that desperately. I think Quinn Miners, the right guard coming back, will help. But the right tackle position with Cam Fleming, we talked about early on in the season, maybe upon further review, had a better game against Seattle than we thought, but against Houston, against now the San Francisco 49ers, and against 2 of the better pass rushers that the Broncos will face in Jonathan Grenard and Nick Bosa. I mean, this is an area that you have to address because the job is not getting done over there in terms of pass protection. Not that you're going to be able to shut down a guy like Nick Bosa, but you got to allow Russell Wilson a little bit more time back there because his strength is what? Throwing the ball downfield. So your offensive line is going to have to hold up on these deeper drops, which right now they just aren't.
And I think that was a tremendous concern. I mean, obviously for the Broncos against the 49ers, Russell Wilson was sacked 4 times. There was one, in my opinion, I think that you're in agreement, Broncos country in agreement, probably shouldn't have counted because it's like he got tripped by Nick Bosa. He stuck his leg out and tripped Russell Wilson. I was like, that's not a penalty? Okay, it is what it is, though. But, yeah. I mean, you are right. I mean, Nick Bosa initially started off the game lined up on the left side, the Broncos' left offensive line against Garrett Bowles. And then in the second half, he moved to the right side against Cam Fleming. Now, after Nick Bosa had several plays where he disrupted everything, I will applaud Nathaniel Hackett and the Broncos offense for adding Eric Saubert and Eric Tomlinson as extra protection help against Bosa. I think that helped. There were times where the Broncos pass protection was good when they were backed up. I mean, there was time where the Broncos were on their own 3-yard line and Russell Wilson got them out of there with the pass and protection really held up there. But if I am a defensive coordinator, if I'm looking at Patrick Graham, for example, for the Las Vegas Raiders, I'm looking at, okay, I'm going to put Max Crosby on the Broncos' right side of the offensive line. I'm going to put him kind of in a tilt, and I'm just going to have him crash down against Cam Fleming. There's a lot of questions that are rising up right here. And Sayre, I feel like my bigger concern here with the Broncos offensive line is in particular at the right tackle spot. And Cam Fleming's got the veteran experience, right? I understand that. I get that's the reason why he got the start initially week 1 and week 2, week 3. But Calvin Anderson has a little bit more step to him. He's a little bit more athleticism to him than Cam Fleming does. Or I think that begs a bigger question. When is Billy Turner going to debut? That is a huge question here at this point in time because he was full on Wednesday, a full participant, limited Thursday and Friday ahead of the 49ers matchup. Part of us wondering, is there a setback going on with Billy Turner? How long will it take for him to get acclimated? To me, I'm not worried about right guard because Quinn Miners was active in an emergency situation. He may be a full go this week. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm mainly concerned about right tackle.
Exactly. And I think you brought up some good options there for the Broncos in terms of, do you want to give Calvin Anderson a shot out there? Maybe use him as an extra tight end at some point. I don't know what they might have to do against guys like Max Crosby, Chandler Jones. I mean, Khalil Mack, like you mentioned, you're going to have to kind of pull out all the stops there. So bringing in the extra tight ends. And what's unfortunate about that is that you're not getting anything from Albert Okwuegbunam in the passing game because you then have to bring in your better blockers to come and help protect Russell Wilson, who's now looking at basically 2 guys, maybe 3 if Kendall Hinton's out there to get open in the passing game. So there's a domino effect to everything that's going on here. And when you're bringing that pressure all heavy off that right tackle side, that forces Russell Wilson to go to his left, which he had a little saucy comment after the game about his throw to Kendall Hinton. And he's like, I guess I can still go to my left, but at the same time, teams are going to continue forcing him to go that direction, right? They want him to go there because that's kind of a historical thing with him about not necessarily being as good moving to his left and working to that left side. So certainly, Cody, especially as many balls have been batted when Russell is stepping up in the pocket and trying to make, tighter window throws across the middle, there's a lot of different, just like I said, domino effects here of the offensive line giving up pressure off that right side. If Russell's able to step up, he's getting inside the pocket and he's trying to rocket fire over the middle, but then the ball's getting tipped at the line of scrimmage or different things like that. So it's causing that ripple effect that I think the Broncos have to be very aware of, and they're going to have to kind of try to make up for it in other different ways. And unlike against the Seattle Seahawks, here's the biggest difference that I've seen over the last 2 weeks, Cody. Against Seattle, the Broncos were moving the ball extremely well against those heavy blitzes off the right side. And why? Because their backs were able to catch passes really quick out of the backfield. Russ was able to get it off to him. They were executing in the screen game. We have not seen that in the last 2 weeks against Houston and against, obviously, San Francisco. The running back screen game or the quick passing game to the backs has not been as effective for whatever reason. So teams defending against that, and the Broncos are really struggling to kind of find that groove and get into scoring range. That wasn't a problem in week 1 and early on in week 2. It's become a problem more lately.
Well, we'll see if the Broncos can address it. But there's some other trending concerns here with the Broncos offense that we haven't touched on, including third down. What about Melvin Gordon as well? We'll dive into that coming up here in just a moment. But real quick, if you love the Locked On Broncos podcast and you're an NFL fan, you'll love the Locked On NFL podcast. Free and available everywhere you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Local experts on the biggest stories, breaking everything down. And there's also the Locked On NFL Game to Game, which takes you through every single game recap from the local experts who cover their teams every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we're going to address some of the other concerns that are trending here with the Broncos offense. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platforms or whether you watch us on YouTube. Thank you so much for your time. Sayre, my friend, there's some other things here we have to address about this Broncos offense, and I think this will be a talking point all week long, which is why we brought it to the forefront here. Should we be worried about the offense? My firm stance on this is that right now, I'd say they start worrying a little bit about it because you can't keep playing like this and expect to win games. The defense can't bail you out as many times as they have because them being on the field too long is something that the Broncos have seen far too often the last several years. Something will have to change on offense. But I think for me in particular, Sayre, a concern that I've had, third down has been an issue. Now against the 49ers, Denver went 6 of 19. That's 31.6% conversion percentage on third down. And they had some third and shorts that they couldn't even convert. They had a lot of third and mediums, third and longs in this game that they simply struggled with. And that's coming off a performance last week where they were 25% conversion percentage on third down. I believe they were 2 of 12, if I'm not mistaken. So Denver's going to have to find a way to be better on third down. They got to stop going backwards. Those are some evident concerns here. But at this point, what reasons have the Broncos given us and given Broncos fans a reason not to be worried?
Well, I mean, to be optimistic here through the first couple of games, they were really moving the ball well between the 20s, right? I mean, they were averaging a high number of yards per drive, getting into scoring range almost every time they had the ball. It was just the problem was then the red zone efficiency, right? 0 for 6 in those first 2 games. Ironically, against the 49ers, they punched in their only red zone opportunity. So they figured that out, but at the same time, it's now a matter of, okay, where is the consistency coming from in this offense? Cortland Sutton has been consistent. Javonte Williams has been rather consistent. But is that it for the Broncos right now? I mean, Jerry Jeudy had a big game in week 1, gets injured in week 2. Really, we didn't see anything from him hardly in week 3. I don't know that there's a passing option right now that's been anywhere near consistent at the tight end position. So the question to me right now, Cody, is what reasons have the Broncos given us not to worry offensively? We haven't seen anything above 16 points scored in 3 games of a Russell Wilson-led offense. You're obviously right now we're kind of thinking like, dang, like I maybe underestimated how much the team is going to miss Tim Patrick out there because like you think, well, you suffer an injury like that, it's next man up. That's the way the Broncos went about it, right? But they haven't been able to pick up that slack, and having a sure-handed target like Tim Patrick, I mean, that sounds like a cool drink of water right now by comparison to what we've seen. So I think definitely, Cody, there's so many reasons right now to be, I mean, pretty well concerned. Even with Russell Wilson manning the ship, he seemed pretty confident after the game that good things are on the horizon. But at this point, we're going to need to see it to believe it.
And I think that's a very fair point, too. And Broncos fans, I mean, they were booing once again in this game. I mean, the offense was being booed off the field. And luckily, as we mentioned, there was that very impressive fourth quarter drive that was led by Russell Wilson and the offense that eventually won Denver the football game here. But I feel like we definitely have to talk a little bit about Melvin Gordon here. Now, for me, Sayre, he scored a touchdown that gave the Broncos the lead in this game. But he had a couple of plays where he lost the football, and luckily it didn't go to the 49ers. Luckily the 49ers weren't able to recover it. But now it's like, okay, hey, so far, week one against the Seahawks, you fumble on the 1-yard line. Okay, I think in that situation, fourth down, you can live with that because it's fourth down and inches. You're trying to make a play. I get it. Things happen. But in this game, he had one where he dropped it as a rusher, and then he also dropped one as a receiver, had the ball knocked out. Ball security, I think Melvin Gordon has become a huge concern here, and I'm not quite sure how the Broncos fix it. I'm not sure how Melvin fixes it at this point. I mean, it's simple. Like, I used to coach running backs. You cover the nose of the football, but I think that maybe for him, when he's trying to make a move, he kind of brings the ball out a little bit, and that's where it's susceptible to being punched out in the armpit. So, I don't know. I was definitely concerned about that, and I think it definitely is a concerning trend going forward that maybe some teams are going to try to rally, hold him up, and then try to strip the ball out.
They will, and I think the concerns with Melvin Gordon are mounting up tremendously at this point. And again, we talked in the offseason about having this two-headed rushing attack and the two, maybe arguably the best running back duo in the NFL, and how Nathaniel Hackett could use multiple backs in his offense. But all of that stuff is a moot point if Melvin Gordon can't hold on to the ball, which has been a problem. I mean, 3 fumbles in the first 3 games. I mean, the hot takers will say he's on pace for 17 this season. So that's just a huge concern. But not only that, Cody, remember a play earlier in the game where Russell Wilson tried to throw him a pass over the middle of the field. The ball hit him in the hands and it just tipped. And I'm shocked that there was no 49ers defender waiting for it. The one fumble that he had was right inside the 5-yard line. Remember, the Broncos were pinned back deep. He dropped the ball, and Russell Wilson had to go dive on it to save that. Basically, the 49ers would have walked in for a touchdown in a couple of plays. It would have been no doubt about it. So that plus the play where he dropped the pass, plus the fumble, like you mentioned, when he caught a pass, to me, Cody, this is just a monumental problem right now. And I feel like every time Melvin Gordon gets the ball, I feel like you can feel the air being sucked out of the stadium. Probably. I know I'm holding my breath watching from home. I'm sure a lot of other people are. And you have people just screaming on Twitter. The caps lock button is stuck. Like, why is Melvin Gordon on the field? Why is Melvin Gordon getting the ball? And you kind of feel maybe is the pendulum swinging for the Denver Broncos, because we saw Mike Boone get probably more snaps than I would guess he's ever had as a Bronco in this particular game. So is the pendulum of trust kind of swinging back his way? The one reason why I'm not so sure, Melvin Gordon got that red zone touchdown where the Broncos did not take him off the field. Even after all the things that we described, they kept him on the field in critical situations, and not Javonte Williams. I'm very interested to see how this plays out, because to me, Melvin Gordon has become a major liability.
And we'll see if he can address these concerns. Last year, he had 3 total fumbles on the season. This year, so far through 3 games, he's tied that at 3. Ball security has to be more important going forward, and we'll see. I mean, if it continues to happen, I imagine we might see a little bit more Mike Boone at this point. But right now, it remains to be seen what happens here. Broncos country, let us know down in the YouTube comment section down below your thoughts and level of concern with this Denver Broncos offense through 3 weeks of the NFL regular season. Our focus now shifts as the Broncos prepare for the Las Vegas Raiders, a road trip to take on the 0-3 AFC West Division rival Las Vegas Raiders and Derek Carr. Can't overlook the Raiders at any point in time. Broncos country, it's going to be a tough week for them. It's going to be a tough challenge, but the preparation begins this week for the Denver Broncos. We'll have you covered on this week's episode, Locked On Broncos, every single day. Thursday, you can look forward to a crossover episode with myself, Sayre, Bedinger, and your boy Q, host of the Locked On Raiders podcast. For all your Broncos news, content coverage, stay your dials tuned here to the Locked On Broncos podcast.